Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Office Hours. This week, I have Phelim White from ComTec Systems. Now, ComTec has put together something that I think is really interesting and something that is really beneficial to MSPs, and that is they have merged Teams and WebEx and phones and given you kind of the best of all those worlds. And so, Phelim, I'm going to go ahead and bring you up and let's chat about this because I think this is really interesting and provides a benefit to the MSPs because of some of the things that ComTec does.
Yes, and good morning. Thank you, Eric, and thanks for having me on. I think you're absolutely right. You know, it gives MSPs more power in the dialogue. It gives MSPs more power in negotiation and just staying relevant in the conversation about what's going on in the collaboration space and how phone systems, collab tools are coming together to help businesses make the best decision they can based on cultural use, based on cost, reliability, ease of use, whatever it may be. Marrying these collaboration tools together is something we're seeing a lot of different businesses grabbing a hold of. Absolutely.
And we really saw this accelerate because of the pandemic, right? And I think it's kind of interesting because with the pandemic, we had this we were still in a transition from a lot of phone to less phone and more Slack and Teams and collaboration tools. So how did kind of that mid-transition position happening at the same time as the pandemic accelerate this and create more of a need for a merger between the collaboration tools?
So there's a bit of a journey there. The world was caught off guard, obviously, with the pandemic, but certainly from a business perspective, it cost America billions, multiple billions of dollars to send people home. And leading up to that point, you know, there was maybe a 20-year journey of different phone providers building their own specific type of tool. You know, whether it was Cisco, Microsoft wasn't really in the game. Maybe Skype would have been the closest, I suppose, at Microsoft. But you know, Cisco would have its own tool, Mitel would have its own tool, ShoreTel and the Ring Centrals and the 8x8s and the cloud guys. We all had our own, you know, mousetrap, and then we'd be dropped into a coliseum of death of demos, you know, all of us together to say, hey, who has the nicest soft tool, not even collaboration tool at this point, just like a soft tool to make and take phone calls from. Then comes the pandemic. People are wondering, you know, if you happen to be in the cloud, easier transition, you can go home, you can use that soft tool. But at that time, Microsoft came along with Teams and said, you know, nice try, everybody, for the last 20 years, but you all just lost. You're going to use this tool, right? And the numbers were staggering. So there was maybe 5 million users logging into Microsoft Teams every day at the beginning of the pandemic. That number now today is something like 500, 600 million users a day logging into Teams. It is the tool of choice. So there's a choice to be made. Do you wrap and embrace yourself around that Microsoft story as a voice provider? How close are you to the MSPs that own the relationship with the end user to have that conversation of trust? You know, how do you build trust around Teams? How do you build trust about us being the vendor or any vendor coming in? And complete that picture. So yes, Teams won the pandemic. And as we've come out of it now, we're seeing Microsoft making a few changes and other providers, voice providers making changes about how they integrate into Microsoft Teams. And I think that's part of the story about what we're going to get into today with regards to Cisco and WebEx and how it goes into Teams.
And one of the interesting things about this for MSPs is going to be the fact that while WebEx is really big in the enterprise world, right? Not so much in the MSP world. So what made you guys choose WebEx as your choice to marry with Teams to create the solution that you have?
Yeah, so so you said something there that reminded me of something, and if I forget to answer your real question, remind me to come back to it. But the interesting thing about globally with Cisco versus Microsoft. It's not just for the SMB or where you think of Cisco being in the enterprise. If you were to look at EMEA and Europe, Cisco WebEx Teams is far more dominant than Microsoft Teams. America has fallen into the Microsoft Teams narrative with much more gusto, right? But it's not just limited to the enterprise. It's across the board. It's in SMBs as well. Now, what was your other part of the question? I knew I'd forget, Eric.
No problem. So it was, what made you choose WebEx as your guys' solution of choice for this?
Yes. So ComTec is a cloud-based phone system provider. And in going to market against, all of our different types of competitors, we decided to use a platform and deliver a service from a platform which is the largest, most bulletproof cloud-based phone system application on the planet, and that is Cisco BroadSoft, right? So you could take pretty much all of the hosted providers around there in the world and add up all the seats together. It doesn't even come close to what Cisco BroadSoft has at a scale across the world. It is the de facto cloud-based phone system piece of software. We are delivering our features and our functionality, and we support 24 hours a day and project manage and deliver all the feature functionality of that Cisco BroadSoft switch to our customers. So as a default, the soft tool in that world is Cisco WebEx Teams. But from the transition through COVID, a lot of customers are coming to us saying, hey, we use Microsoft Teams. Do you guys integrate with it? Do you guys integrate with it? And there are two different ways of doing it. There is doing the traditional Microsoft, direct routing into the 365 environment. You see people do an operator connect. There's multiple different ways in which you can do that type of integration, and we do that. But the other option is to bring Cisco WebEx Teams and put it into that Microsoft environment, which I think is where we're getting to in this conversation, right?
Yeah, and in terms of all of that being put together, there's a lot of issues that can come with what's the right licensing and how do I do all of that. And I know that one of the things that I've heard consistently, because I've had the privilege of interviewing several of your MSP partners, is that you guys handle a lot of those details. So how do you guys kind of handle that license structure? What do you do for the MSP when it comes to making sure that they're doing the right things in terms of licensing and SKUs?
Yeah. So the MSP, not every MSP is built the same, as you know, right? Some do have expertise in voice, some have no expertise in voice. And I would say even the ones that do have expertise in voice are smart enough to say, I'm not going to own this voice portion. I'm going to give it to the experts, right? And that's us. So yes, it's my job, it's my team's job with the MSP that when you're in front of the end user to make sure that you're very clear on what the financial and technical ramifications are of choosing to do direct routing into Teams. And that all starts with the licensing structure. And when it comes to the SMB space, it's pretty fair to say that most of them are not in the market for an E5 license. So when you start dropping down to E3, E1, Business Premium, Business Standard, whatever it may be, that phone system SKU that's required to, turn the lights on to enable direct routing, there's a cost to that. Now, I won't get into the details of it now because it's probably not the time and place, but of recent, the EU has gone through a little bit of legal wranglings with Microsoft and unbundling the phone system SKU from Teams. There's new pricing coming out in EMEA for that type of stuff. And the same thing seems to be happening in America. Maybe not for legacy users of 365, but if you're a new buyer into 365, you may see that they're breaking Teams away. That's a different type of conversation, but I think you're asking, the point we're getting to here, Eric, is it's my job along with the MSP to make sure that we're critically clear on the impacts of pricing when it comes to doing direct routing and what type of license you have and how you can get into enabling Teams to be your tool of choice. But even to back it up just a little bit more, when it comes to your licensing and when it comes to elevating your team's experience at ComTec, it starts off where we're looking to hit a trifecta, where we want to get in and make that Microsoft Teams environment with telephony more reliable, which you can do with direct routing. We want to offer it far better support, because we will be your support mechanism. It's not like you're going to call Microsoft if something's gone wrong with a phone call, in that environment. So we will be the support mechanism. And as we get into how we do WebEx into Microsoft Teams, you'll see that it's less expensive. So with working with the MSP in front of the end user, we're looking to hit that trifecta. Let's be more reliable, let's give it better support, and let's be less expensive.
Yeah, so that's a huge benefit to the MSP. And where I normally hear it from them is they don't have a lot of telecom experience. So that's one complication. So they don't have the team to support it. But it's also on the sales and sales engineering side of things, where you guys are going hand in hand during the sales process to help the MSP build the right solution for their client.
No, that's right. So there's a couple of things there. By bringing in voice as an option for the MSP to bring to the table to the end user, you're keeping the MSP in an environment of being sticky and being more relevant, or staying relevant. Depending on who you speak to, but I've seen evidence of this within the MSP partner community. If an MSP has 125 accounts or 100 accounts, whatever the number happens to be, it's fair to say that there's somewhere between 17 and 21% of that base talking to somebody about voice over IP and or enabling Teams to be a better tool to make and take phone calls from. The question becomes, MSP, do you know your 17 to 21%? Because if you don't, you're talking to somebody else. And that's where I come in. That's where ComTec comes in. ComTec is here to help you uncover what your 20% is. And then when you've identified them, just go into a discovery process. What are the goals? Culturally, are you ready to do this? Culturally, do you still need to see handsets on the desk working in tandem with Microsoft Teams? What about the budgets? Are they in it to do what I'd call the more thoroughbred or purebred version of doing direct routing into Teams, or is there an opening for Cisco WebEx and Teams, whatever it may be? That's the type of conversation I'll have with the MSP to make sure they understand the client base. And then when they identify their 20%, let's have the conversations.
That's awesome. And I really like the approach of you guys going in and providing that type of visibility for an MSP to say, because you have the numbers, 17 to 21% of your clients, if you're not doing phone systems already, is talking to somebody else, and that somebody else more than likely has IT services as well at this point.
No, there's no doubt, and I saw numbers recently, Eric, from Microsoft, based on their what we call PSTN usage. So the public switching telephone network is that old part of phone systems. It's where all the carriers come together, where we make and take phone calls from, right? And that's the unlimited calling path out of your cloud phone system and or Teams. Microsoft were super happy in last year in growing PSTN usage by I think somewhere around 30%, meaning they grew the amount of people that were making and taking calls out via the PSTN by 30% last year. It still only represents something like 20 to 30 million end users of that 500 million logging into Teams every day. There's a lot of room to go. There's tons of growth opportunity. And Microsoft are certainly looking to, plug that hole and get people using it, because once you have voice on your network, it's sticky. It's sticky, man. It's, we hang around like an old rash. Once we're plugged in. Yeah.
So another question I have for you is, what is the advantage to the client of
Mm.
merging their phone system, their calling, with the collaboration tools like Teams?
You mean specifically just with Teams and not talking about WebEx and Teams? Is that the question?
Correct, because I'm going to get
Yeah,
to that
just
one next.
yeah, got it. Okay, so it's so there's a couple of things. It probably starts off with don't get caught again like we all get caught in COVID. Have tools that enables you to work from anywhere, right? That's probably the first fundamental part. You know, be able to work from anywhere. Don't be held hostage to your office. You know, don't be held hostage to wherever. You know, give your staff the ability to be able to work from wherever they want, right? That's the first thing. But then the second thing becomes, well, like I said before, are you going to go to the market and drop yourself into a coliseum of death and look at 5 different vendors of 5 different soft tools, saying which one do I like best, when you're already using Microsoft and 365? So you're looking at it going, how can I make this tool more reliable if I put voice on it, have great support, and be less expensive, or have equal value of what we're doing now? So culturally, that's easy for an end user. When you think of an IT team or you think of an MSP, it's like these guys are already using this as a document repository. They're already calling each other internally. They're already chatting with each other. This is a simple next step to be able to accept the call from a customer, or to make a call to a customer from your laptop, from your computer, from your mobile phone on your app, or from a plastic SIP phone on the desk. You choose. So that cultural shift for a business is super simple. From the MSP's perspective, you're getting really sticky. But not every vendor is picked the same. And thanks for having ComTec on today, Eric. In that, you know, we have our cloud-based phone system is a rock solid, highly available cloud-based, you know, Cisco BroadSoft stack, you know, with less than 67 seconds of downtime for all of last year. I mean, this is a bulletproof type of environment that we're bringing behind that Teams experience. So even if Teams is having a bad day, their phone system is still up. You've separated church and state, because the Teams application has really just turned into being another device to land and make a call. But if Teams is down, and it's not always down that much these days, but it still can be flaky sometimes, right? Your voice is still very much intact, because the brand of the business, the sound of the business, meaning the phone numbers and the contact center, is all in my cloud. So in the event of Teams being down, I can still land those calls anywhere you want.
And that's crucially important, because we do know that the Teams does have issues from time to time. You're right.
Yeah.
It's not often, it's not all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
it is frequent enough and for long enough periods of time that it can cause a disruption.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so,
And voice is cruel, Eric.
yes.
Voice is not like an email or a web browser where you're like, oh, I'll just wait another 2 seconds for the BBC website to come up as it's crawling. No, that's a dropped phone call. That's a
Right.
sales guy losing his or her mind because he just lost that phone call. It has
Yep.
a really damaging effect on the brand. Or customer support inbound call, like all circuits are busy. Oh, I haven't heard that since 1998. You know, it's like where are we at? You know, so these are the holes we're plugging by making sure you have a killer back-end phone system, and wrapping and embracing the end user's choice to use Teams as a device to make and take a phone call. It's like,
Yeah.
if you
And I
want to go
like
that,
that
you get your bag.
analogy. I like that analogy, because you're not using Teams as the phone system. You're just using it as another device to access the phone system.
That's exactly right. Yes, you nailed it.
Okay. So now let's add the WebEx piece. What does the WebEx piece add in
Yeah.
value to the client and to the
hmm
MSP?
So from the MSP's perspective, you're solving a problem, right? So depending on what we hear from the end user, um, and the SMB, sometimes it's cost, right? Where depending on the licensing structure that they have, you have 50 users or 100 users, and they might have an E3, and all of a sudden they're staring down the barrel of an $8 per user per month uplift to Microsoft to gain access to the phone system SKU. Let's just pick on that one as the reason for now, right? Cost. By us taking our Cisco WebEx tools and implanting them into the Microsoft Teams environment, it now means that you have the ability to make and take that phone call to your customer from that Cisco WebEx tool that's nearly surgically implanted into that Teams environment. It looks and feels the same as if you're using Teams. So culturally, it's super easy for the end user to get there. But then from a business perspective, you didn't have to pay the $8 to Microsoft. In terms of the rest of the Microsoft Teams environment, like chatting, document repository, or going to the chat and calling somebody internally in your organization, you're still going to use Teams as you would every day. There's no cultural shift there. Instead of seeing that calls button in the application tray in the left-hand side of Microsoft Teams, you're going to see a little Cisco icon. You click on it, and it looks exactly just like what you would do within your Microsoft Teams environment, except it's being powered by Cisco. So what we're doing is taking arguably the most powerful, robust, bulletproof platform in the world, surgically implanting it into Teams, and letting you make and take those phone calls. Now, there are some advantages to this too that come along. And by the way, it's the same experience on your mobile phone or a tablet or a PC. It's all the same. Where you get some advantages of bringing Cisco WebEx into Teams, unlike just doing regular Teams integration with direct routing, is if you're using a handset. WebEx, because it is the voice tool, knows if you've taken that call on a handset and vice versa. So on the presence for everybody in your environment, you'll see that you're on a phone call. If you did direct routing into Microsoft Teams and not doing the Cisco WebEx into Teams, and you pick up a SIP handset, Teams doesn't know. It's not smart enough to know you're on a handset. So I'm sure Microsoft will fix that at some point, but as of right now, that there's a little bit of a gap there, where presence is not perfect. So that is an additional nice little thing that you get with WebEx going into Teams, that the presence is shared on Teams, it's shared on the handset, it's shared in the WebEx environment, where if you're on the phone, you're not on the phone, you're away, or you're available, whatever it may be. There's also, I'd say, the management from an admin perspective and the MSP side is also advantageous, in that you're just managing your users in that WebEx portal, in your cloud-based phone system portal. You haven't done like the direct routing PowerShell type stuff with direct routing. It's just a simple plugin. So from an admin perspective, you could say that maybe it's a little bit easier. Might be a little argument for that.
So the end user, the client, is getting lower cost as well as more features. I mean, that sounds like a win-win to me.
It's pretty dynamite, right? Yeah. It's and as I say, certainly for the SMB. In fact, just before I got on this call with you, Eric, I was talking to a business, that has just under 100 users and a couple of locations, and they were all in on Teams. But with a little bit of education around the cost structure, around that $8, like, that's okay, keep going, But then we showed them an alternative, and they didn't see any downside to this. There is no downside to it. I don't see. And by the way, we're not alone here, Eric. You're seeing Zoom doing this. Putting Zoom into Teams, Ring into Teams, Aid into Teams. We just happen to be bringing in what I'm going to argue again, the most bulletproof, reliable phone system on the planet, Cisco WebEx, and putting into Teams. So this isn't some Harry Potter magic we're doing over here, and it's something not nefarious where we're going around Microsoft's side doors. This is all above board.
Right.
There's this is happening. But not every MSP knows that it's available. And certainly end users don't know that it's available. It's up to us, it's up to the MSP to get that message out there and say, you can do this. There is a way to do it. And there is a way to make it more reliable, have great support, and be less expensive.
Yeah, and it sounds like this is a great way for any size MSP to be able to pull in that enterprise grade phone system that you get with Cisco
Yeah.
without having to become a Cisco partner, which I know is not easy. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this today. Is there any last words that you'd like to leave with the audience before we wrap up today's call?
Yeah, I think, and by the way, there, give me a few more minutes to talk about stuff, I'm going to take it, right?
Of course.
But no, I think there are two different types of main buyers. There's buyers that are going into the cloud for the first time, and then there are buyers that are going from cloud to cloud. And this message is for both. What I would call one of the pillars of risk mitigation when trying to choose the right cloud provider. One of those pillars is the assets the business already owns. And what I mean by assets, I could talk about conference room gear, handsets, paging equipment, door buzzers, life safety lines. We have the experience of being in the weeds of being an on-premises phone system provider for years. So we know that old legacy stuff like the back of our hands. The difficulty of paging systems and, all these devices, like especially in the manufacturing space. I mean, you've got, phones out by docking areas and cold rooms, warm rooms, clean rooms, overhead paging systems, security doors, all that type of stuff that was plugged into a PBX. We bring that old legacy equipment into harmony and work with the modernization of a collaboration tool environment like Microsoft Teams. So you can be a Teams user and sit at a Teams experience and get access to the paging system, get access to the door buzzer, and complete the whole vision of the business, especially if it's like a manufacturing company or somebody that has, those multiple locations where they need to be in one location but access, an overhead paging system or a door buzzer or some sort of analog device. We make that happen. It's not easy to do. I've seen many instances of customers that we have where they've had a good IT team, the best of intentions, where they've gone out and bought their own session border controllers, and they've gone out and got their own SIP trunks, and they've gone out and got all their own gear, and then looking at a Microsoft page to say, this is how you do it. And then when the rubber's trying to hit the road, it's kind of complicated and difficult to do. This is what we do. So I'd say, as that last parting gift, Eric, we do marry the old legacy world of telephony into the modernization of an application like Microsoft Teams, and make sure the whole environment is under one roof, with your MSP and with us.
And I can say from personal experience that can be a gotcha when you're doing voice over IP, is they forget that they have phones in the elevator, or they have phones out by the pool. You were talking about life safety, or they have a door buzzer, or those kinds of things. So it is really important to be able to support those things. And it is so much easier when you have a partner like ComTec.
Right on. I couldn't have said it better myself, Eric.
All right, Phelim. Thank you so much for being here today.
Right on. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Have a great day.
You too.